Guest again today, we are so excited to have back with us is Al Williams, the president of the Willow Valley Computer Club in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. He is a retired electrical engineer who worked in aerospace for RCA, GE, Marnetti, and Lockheed Martin. In the days of Windows 3.1, he learned about a significant Windows security problem and has been interested in cybersecurity and privacy ever since. Today, he's talking to us part 2 about scammers, and I like the way he says it, other species. So I'll turn things over to Al, and let's continue what you started last month.
Thank you, John.
Absolutely.
And good afternoon, everyone. So, oops, I shouldn't have done that so soon. I need to share first. It's a beautiful day here in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. Let's see, where'd the share go? Oh, there it is. There we go. You should see my basic presentation.
I see the window for the program.
And now you should see only the slide.
Perfect.
All right. So yes, it's a beautiful day here in Lancaster. It's probably about 76 right now. It's nice and sunny. Got some windows open. It's a great day. So yes, this is part 2 of scammers and other invasive species. I chose the word invasive, John, a long time ago because that's how I view these guys. They are invasive. So part 2 is dealing with protecting our online accounts. Part 1 was dealt with protecting our computers. So I'm assuming, so I'm going to do some detailed stuff, but in a way, I'm not going to do detailed stuff that I think you're going to get concerned about. I'm assuming that you use a cell phone, tablet, laptop, desktop, but you don't really care to know how they work. I'm also assuming you want to know enough to protect yourself from threats, and you want the explanations to be thorough but simple. And I'm going to provide source footnotes on most slides to help you find what I consider to be very good information. So we start out with a statement, and I've said this before in previous presentations, but I'm assuming that there are people here who have never heard one of my presentations. Everyone has a threat model. And that threat model says to them, what do I want to protect? What are ways that I may suffer loss? And what do I have to do to prevent loss? I'm assuming that in your threat model, you want to protect your personal identifying information, your personal health information, and your personal financial information. Now, public personal identifying information, PII, this is stuff that you have no choice over. This is public no matter what. Your name, your US mail address, your email address, your home phone, your cell phone, especially if you don't have a home phone. And then there is semi-private PII. And this type of private information has to be provided to services such as healthcare, pay taxes, hold a job, do online shopping, be allowed to drive or fly. This type of semi-private information includes your date of birth, your place of birth, your social security number, your driver's license number, your mother's maiden name, a photograph, your race, your religion, your bank account numbers, your credit card numbers, your passwords, your Medicare number if you have Medicare, and that's a semi-private, but that's so far, but there's even more. It also includes your taxpayer identification number, your health insurance numbers, your professional associations, your educational achievements, your trade associations, your hobbies. And then there's private. This is private information that you could keep to be private just for yourself. It includes your DNA. However, if you ever provided your DNA to a genealogy site, it's no longer private. Your biometric data. But if you use your biometric data, such as fingerprints, retina scans, or other ways of using biometric data, it's no longer private. It's no longer private when you use it on a phone, your cell phone. In general, it would be private, you would think, unless you are required to provide it to your employer or law enforcement. But no, if you use it on a cell phone, it's no longer private. So your threat model, I'm assuming that you do not consider yourself to be at high risk. But due to multiple data breaches, individuals over 60 are easily identified and targeted. And I've experienced that here in our Willow Valley communities. I've worked with multiple people over 60 because this is a retirement community who have been, well, if they haven't been targeted, it certainly looks like they were targeted. And as I said, I've worked with many people in that category. So it's recommended that those who are over 60 take high-risk preventive measures. Now, I'm not presenting those measures. That's a separate course that we're putting together with 8 topics. So my goal is to fortify your threat model. I see I have a problem with my presentation. I want you to be knowledgeable and not ignorant. I want you to be armed with ways to defend yourself. And I want you to be wary. I don't want you to be scared or worried. We start with talking about websites because we're talking about protecting our online accounts. There are static websites and there are dynamic websites. There aren't many static websites nowadays, but there are some. Years ago, we all worked with static websites. We all saw the same information. It was always read-only. It was not interactive, another way of saying read-only. The typical static website would present somebody's resume. A lot of times back then, people would put their resumes up on a standalone website. It would present a portfolio, perhaps, an artist-type portfolio, or it might be a brochure for a company. Static websites can be interactive if they use links, buttons, and animations, but they're very limited in what they can do. So here's an example of the apple.com website as of July 1997. It's static and interactive. It says, welcome to Apple, introducing CyberDrive. You can see that they say something like Apple websites are worldwide, Switzerland, Taiwan, Turkey, and more. You can see a button says to go to a website, and there's various information on the left-hand side there. So it's a very basic website. Back in that day, it would have been a very nice website. Nowadays, we would say it's not a very nice website, but it was back then. So basically, you can't put personal information on a static website. And most static websites will not ask you to try to protect any account that you may create. Instead, they will ask you for an email address, and that will be it. Let's go to dynamic websites. Visitors can see information that is selected for them by the website. You can read and you can write. They are interactive as before, like static websites, links, buttons, animations. And typically there are things like retail stores, financial websites, news, membership websites, and more. These are the typical websites that we see today. And typically, we put our public, semi-private, or maybe other information, personal information, on these dynamic websites. And we need to protect our accounts, which in turn protects our information. So when I said other personal information, I was thinking about things like personal preferences, like styles and colors, or personal attributes like clothing sizes and shoe sizes. That's what I would call other personal information. Many websites give us login options, I should say. When we log into a website, we want them to know that we are authentic, and they want to know that we are authentic as well, and that we are not an imposter. We're accustomed to using username and password. There are options that make it more difficult for an imposter to log in. And we may be able to choose an authentication option that better meets our needs. So there are basically three factors: something we know, you know, something I know. In other words, something that either you know and only you know, or something I know and only I know. Something we have, something you are. It's usually expressed as something you know, you have, or you are. And if you use two of those factors, it's called 2FA, which means two-factor authentication. When it comes to something we know, some typical answers are an answer to a security question, a password, a passphrase, or a PIN. Something that we have would be a cell phone, a software authenticator, or a security key. Something that we are is a fingerprint, retina scan, a face or facial ID, and our voice. So if we use something that we know as an authenticator, websites typically require passwords. That's been the default for years. So because it's a default, there's been multiple attacks on passwords. Google states that at least 65% of everyone reuse passwords across multiple sites, if not all websites. There's another survey that says 91% of respondents claim to understand the risk, but they do it anyway. But 59% say they do it anyway. And the average person reuses each password as many as 14 times. Compromised passwords are responsible for 81% of the hacking-related breaches. And it's not just people at home. We're talking about compromised people, compromised passwords in the business world. Compromised passwords are responsible for 81% of hacking-related breaches. To protect yourself against those password attacks, you need to create passwords using a password generator or rolling dice. And the reason for that is that humans just are not good at creating good passwords. The technical term is entropy. Humans are not good at creating passwords that have good entropy. However, if you roll the dice or you use a password generator, password generators have built in what's called a pseudo-random generator, which is close enough for the entropy that we need. And so that's the best way to create a password. Password should be at least 16 characters. It used to be that the federal government would say 12 characters. Now, I'm glad to say there's recommending 16 characters. And my source for that is the CISA website, which I've given the source down at the bottom of the slide. They should be 16 characters. Password should be unique for every account. If a password is exposed in a data breach, the hackers will assume you use that password elsewhere. And they will try your username and your password at all the websites they can think of, seeing if they can get into your account. A major way to get to circumvent that is to use a unique password for every account. You should record your user password and username. I have worked with people who, for some reason, forget to do that. I prefer that you don't record it on paper, but I've worked with people who insist on it. If you do put it on paper, make a point of every time you make a change that you cross out the old information so that you can see what is the new information. Because I've worked with people who didn't bother to change to cross out the old information. And I've seen like 4 or 5 passwords and they didn't know which one was which. The preferred way to deal with passwords and usernames is to use a password manager. Now, some websites require security questions, and I think this is going more and more is going by the wayside. But when you create the account, they want you to provide answers to their questions. And the idea is that you answer one of those questions when you log in. Now, if your personal information is available on the internet, and there's an awful lot of about us that's on the internet, the attacker can easily answer the security question and log in. So the best idea is don't provide accurate answers to your security questions. For my cell phone carrier, I chose not to provide accurate answers to a security question. One of my daughters wanted to access the Verizon account, and she had every right to do so, but she encountered this security question, and she didn't know that I had provided an inaccurate answer. So she provided the accurate answer, and it didn't work. And then she texted me asking, "Dad, what did you do?" So it's a good idea. Don't provide accurate answers to security questions. Another authentication factor is using something we have. And some websites will offer this web option: time-based one-time passwords. TOTP is what they're commonly called, and they will use either a text message or email to communicate with you. Now, most of them are 6 digits, but there are some services that will use 4 digits or 5 or 7. I don't think I've ever seen 8 digits. Usually they want to have enough digits to make it hard for somebody else to guess, but they also don't want to make it too hard for you to enter those digits. You know, you're sitting there looking at your phone and you're trying to type the numbers into the website. So here's an example on the right-hand side of the screen. PayPal, is your security code. Don't share it. I'm obviously sharing it right now. On the other hand, I'm not worried about it because these are one-time passwords. That password should never show up again, at least not in anything that comes to me. Now, these TOTPs are typically valid for 30 seconds. And an example of what I'm showing you right here is SMS. Simple Message Service is the official name for a text message, and this would came to me as a text message. One way for an attacker to attack that way of augmenting passwords is to do a SIM swap. The attacker convinces your phone carrier, and I think it's harder and harder to do now, but it used to be very easy to do, to move your phone number to a new SIM card, which the scammer owns. And if they manage to convince the phone carrier, the representative at the phone carrier, to do that, the result is that all your phone calls and also all your text messages, your TOTPs, now go to the attacker's phone, who is using your phone number. Now, are SIM swaps successful? Well, in 2021, there were 1,600 complaints. There was a loss of $68 million due to SIM swaps, according to bitdefender.com. It isn't likely that you would suffer a SIM swap, but if you did, it could be costly. So how do you prevent them? The cell phone carrier that I use, allows you to add a PIN to your account. Do that. Another way to do that is don't use your normal telephone number, cell phone number, or TOTP codes. Instead, get a free Google Voice number or pay for a third-party VoIP provider phone number and use that. Because that way you can prevent the SIM swaps. Now, I personally use the Google Voice number as a way to prevent SIM swaps. If you do use Google Voice or another third-party VoIP, make certain that you do not forward either to your cell phone number, because if you do, and you happen to get caught in a SIM swap, your text messages that were going to Google Voice or the third-party VoIP will automatically go to your cell phone number, and it will defeat everything that you're trying to do by preventing a SIM swap. You can do things to mitigate SIM swaps. Don't talk about your financials on the web or social media. Don't post your phone number or any personally identifying information. Now, I already said that an awful lot of that has to be on the web. It has to be available publicly. And there's an awful lot of things that we want to get, services that we want to get available on the web that requires us to divulge an awful lot. But where possible, minimize what you do in terms of posting PII. And it may be possible to do something besides using the text message approach for getting a TOTP. So some websites offer this option. Use a phone number. You say, well, that's about the same thing. Well, it is. Okay, yeah, I'm talking out loud here. I'm just realizing there's a flaw in my logic. Sorry, John and Judy. But you can use a TOTP by get a TOTP by using a phone number, not a text message. And again, what you would want to do is you would want to use a Google Voice or a third-party VoIP to get your TOTP. Now, websites frequently require that you use a cell phone. They know an awful lot about phone numbers. So if that does happen, well, what you have to rely on is that the website will call your phone and read the TOTP digits to you. There is a problem there because cell phone calls are not encrypted. And cell phone calls can be encrypted, but it has to be done at the cell phone tower that's near you, and it's difficult to do. So this attack is very unlikely. As I just said, one way to deal with this is a free Google Voice number or a paid third-party VoIP number. Some websites offer TOTPs by email. Not a good idea because scammers are so successful with phishing attacks. They can pretend that they are the ones sending you the a TOTP. Well, anyway. So what you want to do is select a different option unless this is the only option you can use. And then some websites will work with a software authenticator. Now, multiple authenticators are available. There's Authy, Bitwarden Authenticator app, which is a standalone app. Bitwarden itself, the app Bitwarden, has an integrated authenticator if you have the paid plan. And then ProtonPass, the app, has an integrated authenticator. These are the ones I think would be the best to consider if you're looking at software authenticators. If your threat model requires maximum security, do not store 2FA codes in your password manager. Use a different way, use a different software authenticator. Don't put them in your password manager in case somebody manages to get the password to your password manager and break in. And never store the authenticator code that gets you into your password manager inside the password manager. It creates a circular loop and you could lock yourself out. So what does a software authenticator look like? Well, here's an example of Authy. There's a 6-digit code that's being displayed, and you can see that it's telling me that in the 11 seconds, it's going to change the code. You install the software authenticator on your cell phone, your iPad, your laptop, or desktop, if it's supported. Authy at one time did run on desktop, and I loved it. Now it runs only on cell phones. Bitwarden runs only on cell phones. ProtonPass runs on desktops. So if you're looking for an authenticator, but ProtonPass does not have a standalone software authenticator. It has one that's built in. So things are a little bit dicey from my point of view. I love the idea of a software authenticator on my desktop, independent of the password manager, but it's not readily available at this time. I wish it were. So if you decide you want to use a software authenticator, each website that supports software authenticators has instructions telling you how to set the software authenticator up. When you go to the website will tell you how many digits are needed to be able to from the authenticator. You enter the 6 digits that are shown on the authenticator into the website, and you are logged in. Now, I mentioned Authy and Bitwarden. Google Authenticator and Microsoft Authenticator also exist, but I really, similar to the previous presenter, I really recommend you stay away from Google products, period. So I would not use a Google Authenticator. And I've really not heard anything good about Microsoft Authenticator. So I would just stay away from both, but they are popular. Now, some of you may be aware that there was an attack on Authy in 2022. Authy at the time had 75 million users, and the data breach impacted 93 out of the 75 million. I personally think that's very good. I continue to use Authy. I know that some people said, no, not good enough, and I'm leaving. And I can understand that. I mean, the first time that LastPass had a problem, I didn't leave LastPass. But the second time they had a problem, I abandoned LastPass and I went to Bitwarden. Now, Authy recommends to prevent an attack like what occurred in August of 2022, that once you have installed Authy on all the devices that you want to run Authy on, that you disable this setting called all multi-device in the app. What that setting does, it makes it possible when you set that up, when you enable that configuration, all multi-device on your app, it makes it possible to add Authy to another device and then log in on that other device. And now that other device has the Authy 6-digit codes. If you disable that configuration, nobody else can set up an app which would enable access to the 6-digit codes. In my opinion, the likelihood of a breach at Authy is very low, which is why I'm willing to consider continuing to use it. Although I am looking for another way. And I just have not found what I think is a successful way to do it. Authy runs on cell phones. It runs on Apple Watch. There's a browser extension. It used to run on Windows Desktop and they dropped that app. It's no longer available. It does have encrypted recovery backups. You need to back up Authy, and you need to keep the password safe when you do a backup. It offers 3 types of authentication, including push. And that's the only one I'm going to talk about because it is the most secure and it is the default. In that case, the 6-digit codes come from off the server. Now there is a problem. If you decide that you want to move from Authy to another authenticator, there is no feature inside Authy that allows you to export those codes to a standalone file and then import them into another authenticator. Authy does not support that. Bitwarden has an app, as you know. The premium feature, which is $10 a year, which I think is really reasonable, includes an integrated TOTP authenticator. It has, as I mentioned earlier, a free standalone mobile app authenticator running on the iPhone and Android. Currently, and in the future, it does not require a Bitwarden account. It does generate and store 2-factor authentication codes. And the Bitwarden app can also do the same thing. It can generate and store 2-factor authentication codes. But the Bitwarden Authenticator standalone authenticator has a problem as far as I'm concerned. And when I talk about my threat model, my problem with it is the current version of the Bitwarden standalone authenticator, it does not support syncing with other devices. This means that should your phone fail or be unavailable, you would not have access to your 2FA codes. Now, the next version will support cross-devices syncing. Now, here's a picture which comes from the Bitwarden website. The grade column shows you the current version, which came out in May of this year. And you can see where it says local authenticator codes, which means it does not use your Bitwarden account information. It does not use your username or your password that you have for Bitwarden. Instead, it relies upon the fact that to get into your phone, you will protect your phone with a PIN or with a touch ID or a face ID, whatever it is you're using with your phone. And it relies upon you protecting Bitwarden by protecting your phone. It will allow you to import and export codes, 2-factor authentication codes. The next phase, phase 2, it will support, still keeps the same things that's available right now, but it will support syncing the Bitwarden authenticator with your Bitwarden account, which means that you have a standalone Bitwarden authenticator, but you will sync with the Bitwarden account, which means in turn, you can now use that Bitwarden authenticator on your other devices. Like let's say you have a spouse that has a phone and you have the Bitwarden authenticator on it. Those 2 Bitwarden authenticators will now show the same information. Currently, they wouldn't. You'd have to go to each phone and set the Bitwarden authenticator up by going to each website and set up the 2FA code for that website, going to the next website and doing the same thing. In the future, they will have even more features, but phase 2, for my purposes, my threat model, phase 2 meets my needs. So I have Bitwarden Authenticator on my phone. I'm not using it because it just doesn't meet my needs at this time. Proton Pass. If you have the plus plan and higher price plans, includes an unlimited 2FA authenticator built into Proton Pass. Now there is a free plan that's available for Proton Pass, and it supports only 3 logins with 2FA autofill. So 3 logins means that for 3 different websites, it will support those with 2-factor authentication autofill. Proton Pass has a browser extension. It has iPhone and Android apps, and it has Windows and Linux desktop apps, which makes it really attractive to me. Now, I've asked Proton Pass support if Proton is going to provide a Proton standalone software authenticator. And I've been told that it's not currently in the plan. But if they did, I would love it. So that is one of your options, is to use Proton Pass. So attacking software authenticators. Scammers will try to deceive you so that you log into their website instead of the real website. As you log into their website, they log into the real website. This is a man-in-the-middle attack. They will, in some way, try to convince you that it's time for you to log into their website. And as you do, you're not really into your website you want to log into. And as you do, you're not really logging into that website, you're logging into theirs. They can take the information from the software authenticators and they log into the real website. And they now control your account on that website. So how do you prevent software authenticator attacks? Well, you have to use a combination of strong passwords and the authenticator. So using a password manager with very strong passwords makes it hard for the attacker to access your password, especially when you use a strong and unique password for every account. And that helps to prevent it. It all goes hand in hand. Each step helps to mitigate the total attack surface. You can also use a hardware security key. You can use a passwordless authentication. And you can use password authentication and a hardware security key together. And these methods will authenticate with the actual website, but will not authenticate with a fake website. So if you use a password manager and autofill is turned on, that password manager will not autofill on a fake website. If you use a hardware security key, it will not authenticate with a fake website. If you use passwordless authentication, the same thing. It will not authenticate with a fake website. And of course, you can put the two of them together, passwordless authentication and a hardware security key, and they will not authenticate with a fake website. Now, why would you do that? The last one, the combination of passwordless and a hardware security key, you might do that if you are concerned that somebody might have access to your passwordless authentication, have access to your computer, and they can use the feature, the software on your computer to do the passwordless authentication. In that case, if you're concerned about that, the hardware security key, which you would carry on you and would not leave lying around, that would make it possible for you to ensure that nobody can, that nobody can get access to your website without you giving them permission. Just a second. And I've talked about software authenticators, and now we're going to talk about password managers. Here's an example of the Proton website, and I'm using Bitwarden. I've got a Bitwarden extension installed in the browser. And what happens is you can see right here, it's indicating, I blew it up right here, blew that section of the browser window up. Bitwarden is saying on this particular website, I have one entry in my password manager that matches this website right here. I've already logged in to the Bitwarden browser extension. And it shows that not only that there's an entry, it shows that it has the log information for that account. In my case, I've used two-factor authentication for that Proton account. And Proton is asking me to enter the 6-digit code displayed on my authenticator. So the password manager benefits. You can control access to your passwords. If it's on a piece of paper, anybody that has access to that piece of paper has access to your passwords. It can generate strong passwords, and it can make them very uniquely random. It's a secure storage for your passwords and other information. You don't have to worry about it. It's easy to access passwords. You don't need to memorize passwords. If you do update a password on a website, it's easy to update it. There is a single point of failure. If the password manager is hacked or the master password is compromised. There can also be a drawback in the terms of device compatibility. If the password manager, let's say it's a password manager that's designed to run only on Apple, well, then it won't run on Windows, it won't run on Linux. So it can be a device compatibility problem. Cost might be a problem. Bitwarden, $10 a year is not a cost problem. Proton Pass has if you're just going to use Proton Pass, I think it's low cost. I don't remember what the cost is now because I use Proton Unlimited. So I pay a subscription for all the Proton apps. So I don't know what the individual apps cost. Let's talk about the single point of failure if it's hacked. At this point, you really should use a password manager which has a reputation for security. Bitwarden, Proton Pass are two of them. I would classify 1Password as another. I don't really like 1Password because it's not open source, it's proprietary. And I think you get a better security posture when you work with software that's open source. I know that some people like 1Password, but as I said, I think it's better when you work with software that's open source, and Bitwarden and Proton Pass both have excellent reputations and both are open source. So you do want cross-platform compatibility across Windows, Apple, Android, and Linux. And Bitwarden and Proton Pass do that. Bitwarden has free and paid plans. Proton Pass, as I indicated before, has free and paid plans. You can find out more about the Bitwarden by going to the website that I've shown here, bitwarden.com/pricing. And then Proton has a pricing plan for all the apps, which is at the /pricing. And if you want to know what the price is just for Proton Pass, you would go to proton.me/pass/pricing. What about password manager emergencies? You forget your master password. You lose access to your software authenticator's time-based one-time password data store. Those codes are stored. They're not really stored. The mechanism for storing them is kept in a data store. You lose access to your password manager's servers. Your computer is hacked. This might be a password manager emergency. Are you prepared for that? So what about emergency access? Bitwarden Premium supports emergency access by a trusted emergency contact. To set that up, you would have to send an invitation to the person that you want to trust, have a trusted contact. They have to accept the invitation, and then there's a confirmation. Proton Pass does not have emergency access. You could, however, rather than using the emergency access that's built into the password manager, you could just provide the log information to your trusted contact in a side channel. In other words, you could do what one of my daughters does. She puts the username on a sheet of paper and puts that piece of paper in an envelope and mails it. And then she puts the password on a second sheet of paper, puts it in an envelope and mails it. There's no way in general anybody's going to be able to figure out what in the world is going on when you see a sheet of paper that just has a username and that's all. And the same as when you get the password and that's all you see. You have no idea how to connect it. Personally, I don't do it that way. I use Signal to provide login information to people I want when I want them to know what my login is for a certain account. But if you have an emergency, you should have an emergency sheet for your password manager. And this requires several slides to discuss it. You should put on that sheet the username and password for your computer. We're talking about a piece of paper. Put on that sheet your username and password for your computer, the PIN for your phone, the email address used to log into the password manager, and the password. Now, if you use 2FA in order to log into the password manager, you need to also put down the name and location of the authenticator and any 2FA authenticator backup codes. These are recovery codes, or one-time codes, I should say. The location of some of these codes are provided at these websites. Gmail has a recovery code, and I stuck it in here because a guy who has a website called passwordbits.com, he added that to his emergency sheet, so I did it as well in this presentation. But Bitwarden has a recovery code URL, and Proton Mail has a recovery code a URL. In addition, on that emergency sheet, you should have the name of your password manager. That is it a Bitwarden? Is it a Proton Pass? If you use two-factor authentication or a hardware security key, you should put the name and location of the authenticator, its password, and the location of the hardware security key and any PIN that the hardware security key would use. You should also do backups of your password manager. And I'll get to that in a second. You should put the location of the latest backup. It should be an encrypted backup. And you should provide the password for that backup. If you keep this backup information separately on a separate document, you should tell people on the emergency sheet, who's looking at the emergency sheet, where they could find this password manager's backup document. So you print everything that's on paper and put the emergency sheet of paper in a secure location. I recommend that you might want to set up a Word document with like a set of forms where you're going to identify the names of these fields, print that out, and only print all of this information on paper. You really don't want to put this in a Word document Because if you put it on a Word document and you happen to be scanned, some hacker gets inside, they will find that eventually. And if they do, they have all this information, which you do not want them to have. Of course, once you have all this information, this emergency sheet and this separate backup document, you want to tell your trusted contacts how to find it. And it's a good idea to review the contents with them beforehand. Now, making backups of your password manager. I'm going to be talking about Bitwarden, but the backup steps for other password managers should be similar. You want to export the content of your password manager as an encrypted JSON file. That may not make sense to you right now, but if you start trying to do a backup and you look at export, you will find out that there is an option of an encrypted JSON file, and that's what you want to use. You also want to back up the TOTP data stored. You want to make certain that you understand how each website has a recovery workflow and back that up. If you use Bitwarden's organization feature, then that's a separate export, and you want to back that up as an encrypted JSON file. If you attach files inside Bitwarden, which it supports, it allows you to attach a file to an entry in Bitwarden. Unfortunately, if you do that, when you do these exports, those files, those attached files, will have to be exported by hand. So you'll need to have a text file which explains which file goes with which vault entry. And you should have a README file that provides the password used to create the vault exports, whether or not you're using bitwarden.com or bitwarden.eu, the master password, the 2FA recovery code, and the authenticator recovery information. It's best practice to store the backups on a flash drive and to keep a copy of the README with each flash drive. I put my backups on Proton drive, but realistically, it would be even better yet in terms of protecting my information and I shouldn't say protecting my information, but ensuring that it's available to me, regardless of the status of the internet. It's best practice to store the backups on a flash drive. Here's an alternate backup process to doing the backup, which I've not done, but I think this is probably ideal. Proton Pass can import all the information from other password managers. So what you could do is use the Proton Pass import process to move the contents of the Bitwarden vault to Proton Pass. And the import includes any two-factor authentication data that you have in Bitwarden. And I think that this is the way to go forward, is to do this, to have a complete set of data. I still would do the emergency sheet, and I still would do the password manager backup, but I certainly would also include this because it's less likely that you're going to forget to do a step when you are doing all the things that the emergency sheet wants you to do, or doing all the things that you're supposed to do when you're doing a password manager backup. This makes it more likely you're going to get everything done correctly. So some websites offer another option to help you protect your information. They offer hardware security keys. The hardware key sends a secure, unique encrypted code which verifies you to the website. The way it works is you plug the key into a USB port And then when the software on your browser says tap the key, you do so. Or you hold the key next to your phone. And when requested, you tap the key. The dominant hardware security key provider is Yubico. It's not the only provider, but it dominates this space by a wide margin. Hardware keys, security keys, do not require any software on your cell phone, your iPad, your laptop, or desktop. They don't need a battery. They come in different sizes with different connectors because your cell phone, for instance, would have, well, who knows what a cell phone has now, because Apple is changing the connectors. But typically for laptops and desktops, you do know that those will be either USB-A or USB-C. But so here's a picture of the YubiKey 5 series, which is the current series that's being used. Over here, you can see the USB-A type connector. This is USB-C. This is the lightning connector for a phone. And down here is USB-C. Here's a USB-C. Here's a teeny weeny USB key. Plugs into your computer. You could just barely see that it's there. And here's the same thing as this one. Over here is this one, which is a USB-C connector. This is very old information, but it gives you an idea of how many different companies support hardware security keys. And they do it for a wide variety of applications, like computer login, remote access and VPN, identity access management, which most of us are not interested in, password management, privileged access, most of us have nothing to do with that. Online services, that is something we're interested in. You can see here that Amazon will support it. We're not developers, but that is supported. We don't do contact management systems, but some people do, and they support it. It's very wide. Hardware security keys are recognized in many different parts of the computer world as being a valid way and an important way of verifying that you are who you say you are. For modern systems, which are going to passwordless authentication, which we call it passwordless authentication, and we may call it passkeys, but it's really called web authentication or FIDO2. There's a FIDO U2F, one-time password capability, OpenPGP3, smart card authentication. This series of key, this YubiKey 5 series supports all that. The YubiKey 5 series can use a PIN or a biometric gesture to unlock the key. When it says biometric gesture, what it means is you tap the key. The PIN, in one account I have, it requires a PIN with the key to get in. There's a lot of capability with the YubiKey 5. You can use Google to search for your website support for hardware security keys. Vanguard supports security key, Wells Fargo does. The important thing is there are no known successful attacks on hardware keys, which is according to Yubico, but I've not read anything that denies Yubico's claim. Brian Krebs, in his blog Krebs on Security back in 2018, he said that Google has not had any of its 85,000 plus employees successfully phished on their work-related accounts since early 2017, when it began requiring all employees to use physical security keys, translate that to be hardware security keys, in place of passwords and one-time codes. So hardware security keys are very secure and highly recommended. Not always convenient, but highly recommended. There is another way for websites to help you out. They can use prioritized authentication. So the website asks you to use your hardware security key. But if you don't have it, then a 6-digit code is sent via a text message to the phone number that you provided. And that's how Vanguard works. There's also a authentication method called using something we are. And we now get to passwordless authentication, in which case we're talking about password location in terms of using Face ID, Touch ID, or a passcode. And passwordless authentication also supports hardware security keys. So passwordless authentication is nowadays called passkeys. But why do we want to use passkeys? Because it can't be phished. There are two keys, a private key and a public key. Each of those keys is a digital key, that is, it exists as a string of characters. It uses both keys, both public and private. They are related to each other. The public key is derived from the private key. They're not standalone. They are intertwined. You can't take an arbitrary private key and an arbitrary public key and have them work together. They have to be, the public key has to be derived from the private key. One way to think about this is that the private key is the parent and the public key is the child. Now, the private key you hold on to. It's either stored on your cell phone, an iPad, a desktop, or what other device you are using. The public key is stored on the service you're going to use. For instance, it might be email, it might be a random website, but whatever the service is that you're going to use, they would have the public key. When you log into that service, the service's public key verifies that you have the necessary private key on your device. Or to say a little bit differently, the child knows who the parent is. The graphical user interface for these passkeys is still up in the air. This is one way it could appear. This is according to Google. The first step, you see a panel which asks you to sign in. You put in your username. The next panel that shows up might give you a list of passkeys. And you click on a list and you say, I want to use this passkey, and you click yes. Then they may want a biometric confirmation that it's you. In this case, it wants your Touch ID. And finally, you're logged in. In this case, because it's a Google presentation or Google explanation, you're logged into your Google account. Bitwarden supports passkeys. You can have up to 5 YubiKeys to get into a single Bitwarden account. I'm not certain why they do that. It's kind of nice though in a way, because it means that if you had a trusted contact, not only would you be able to give them the password and the username to your Bitwarden account and the password, you could skip the software authentication and instead just give them a YubiKey. So that way, only they unless they lost that YubiKey, they'd be the only ones that could log into your Bitwarden account. Of course, you would have to have a YubiKey as well, and then you could log into the Bitwarden account. So you could have up to 5 people who could access your Bitwarden account using a YubiKey, and this would be very secure. Proton Pass is a little bit different. They support passkeys, but you may have only one YubiKey on a Proton Pass account. Passkeys, I think, well, I know I have exactly 3 accounts that use passkeys. I'm not too excited about passkeys. It's very unwieldy the way it stands right now. Support continues to be rolled out. Number of websites supporting passkeys is increasing. Here are some websites you can go to find out which websites support passkeys. This one's at passkeys.io, who supports passkeys. And then this website, passkeys.directory, will just give you a list. Passkeys are available on a wide range of devices: Android, Apple products, Google. Google is not a device. Well, yes, it is. If I'm thinking about Google phones, but anyway, Google supports hardware security keys, Windows. But the problem is the capability to sync our private keys across operating systems is not available yet. When I say operating systems, I mean between Windows and Android, or between Windows and Apple. It just isn't there. So they just don't happen. But there is a fallback, which I think is very attractive. You can use password managers. If you store your passkeys in a password manager that works on more than one operating system, then you are effectively syncing your passkeys across operating systems. So if that's something you want to do, if you want to use a passkey for a website on more than one device, use a password manager. And then they may give you the option, the website may give you the option of a passkey and a hardware security key. Usually this would only be done on a high-risk account, but you may want to do it. And I indicated before, YubiKey Series 5 supports passkeys. iPhone and newer iPhones support the YubiKey 5 NFC, near field communication. You touch the YubiKey to the phone, and that's how the phone recognizes the YubiKey. Android phones, if they have NFC support enabled, they will support the YubiKey 5 NFC. A YubiKey Series 5 key supports up to 25 separate accounts. So if you have, let's say you're using a YubiKey for your financial accounts, bank investments. Maybe you're using it for medical accounts that support it. It's kind of hard for me to imagine you would need more than 25 separate accounts. So one key should be sufficient. If you don't, then you would just get a second key or a third key to do the additional separate accounts. So I've talked about encryption at various points, or at least I alluded to it. Here are some websites I think are very good if you'd like to learn more about encryption. At the entry level, there is a blog entry titled "What is Encryption?" written by Fergus O'Sullivan, which is updated in 2024, early 2024. At the intermediate level, there is a series called Cryptography Essentials, done at the Practical Networking website. The short URL is pracnet.ce. These are 15 short videos. Each one of them is about 5 minutes. This guy is amazing. He knows what he's talking about, and he knows how to explain the concepts of cryptography very clearly. And he also, by the way, knows how to explain networks very clearly. So if you go to his website, Practical Networking, you'll find that he talks about a wide range of things besides cryptography essentials. Highly recommended website. And then if you really want to get into the weeds, there is a book, Serious Cryptography, 2nd edition, A Practical Introduction to Modern Encryption. Came out in 2024. I would recommend that if you want to get into the weeds. For passkeys, I would suggest for the entry level, this article that was written in How to Geek in 2021. Fergus O'Sullivan that also wrote a blog entry on what is a passkey in 2024. And for the detailed level, the duo.com people have a blog where they talk about the fundamental components of a passwordless architecture. And that blog was generated in 2022. I have worked with people who have been scammed, and there was confusion First thing I would like to say, if you have been scammed, you're not alone. Others have been scammed as well, and there is help. Turn off your computer, notify your bank and the credit bureaus. File a report with local law enforcement. I left the name of our local law enforcement group, West Lampeter Township Police, on this slide. Use this website to find the proper federal agency to report your scam, usa.gov/where-report-scams. Talk with a social worker or a counselor. This is also, the next two things are local to us. File a report with our IT department and contact the computer club to secure your computer. What I would say for you guys, you should find somebody who knows how to secure your computer. That is, how to ascertain if you really have been deeply hacked, meaning that software has been put on your computer that has enabled the hacker to manipulate your system files, to add script files. If that has happened, then you need to get somebody who's going to help you to wipe your operating system and to reinstall the operating system. So you'll need to talk to somebody who knows how to secure your computer. In summary, we can reuse passwords and encourage criminals. Security questions can be attacked unless you use untruthful answers. Time-based one-time passwords can be attacked unless you take steps to prevent access to the TOTP. Hardware security keys have not been successfully attacked. Passwordless authentication cannot be successfully attacked. And password managers support strong passwords, but the information in the vault needs to be backed up and an emergency sheet created. Part 3 will be other invasive species, and that will be in November of next month, November 20th next month. Are there any questions?
I'll let you know that that was an excellent. Can't wait till next month with the further part 3. Judy is checking on her list to see if there are questions. But I thought that was a tremendous amount of information, and definitely need to review that when she sends out your slides. Okay, checking on Judy.
Here I am.
There you are.
Yes, indeedy. Would Al please speak about the recent enormous data breaches, Choice Healthcare, medical payment processor, and National Public Data background check company?
Well, I think maybe the worst one is the National Public Data. They were all pretty bad. Unfortunately, you don't have an awful lot of recourse when this happens. What you can do and should do is there are steps you can take. You can go and here, just a second. I'm going to reach for a sheet of paper I have. One of the, you may remember that there was a scam of that had a lot of impact on various health systems. And the company that was behind, or the heart of it, was a company called Change Healthcare. And I have a letter from them in front of me, and you may have received it as well. And it's rather lengthy. And they tell you what you can do. And I'm just going to read it to you. 1, review your account statements from your healthcare providers, your insurance company, and financial institutions. 2, provide any updated personal information to your healthcare provider. One of the things they're recommending is to bring a photo ID with you to every appointment that's possible, like a driver's license. Next, order your free credit report. You can go to annualcreditreport.com and get your free annual credit report and review it carefully. Enroll in this case, they're providing this at no cost. Enroll in something called IDX Credit and Identity Monitoring Services. And here's something that you can do as well. If you do encounter any unauthorized transactions on any of your financial accounts, contact the U.S. Federal Trade Commission. Place a fraud alert on your credit file. You probably have heard about Equifax and Experian and TransUnion. Those are the three major credit bureaus. Put security freezes on your credits with the same three credit bureaus. And that is about as much as you can do. So it's regardless of who it is that you are, regardless of how your information has been exposed in any data breach, that is essentially what you have to do.
Okay. I have my very first credit card was a Discover card, and I signed up for their Social Security number monthly checks email back to me. And after the breach down in Florida with all the Social Security numbers up on the dark web and then just out free and clear on the dark web, I finally received something from Discover Card that says your Social Security number is out and about out there. And you should, which wasn't fun to receive. And you should also check, have I been pawned, to see if your email addresses are out and about, are in there, and from where they have been breached. And that's always an exciting thing. And it's interesting to note when I do that, it's all from places I have been back in the day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it's interesting that I always say that I've been doing this for so long that all of my information is out and about on all the bathroom walls on the internet, because back in the day, we didn't know about any of this stuff, and we just had it all out there hanging around. And then, oops, along comes, the phishing and the hoo-haws and all that good kind of stuff. But it's really unfortunate that we have to put up about this. And the fact that when we were asked for our mother's maiden name, the majority of us never thought of just putting just some strange name there. We just, typed up what it really is. So next question.
Well, let me just say that what I was responding to was the question of how would you react to a data breach? Yes, you can do things for like online services, like somebody just popped up a little chat question of IRS. Yes, you can put a pin on your IRS account. You can do other things, but when it comes to a data, and you can use "Have I Been Pawned" to discover if you've been in a data breach. But when it comes to the fact that you found out you are in a data breach, that's about all you can do.
One credit card login site says an alternative is token login. What is that? And that was at 11:42 this morning.
Token login. I think that has to be another name for one-time password, time-based one-time password. If it's not, if it say it's not the same thing, it has to be the same concept. Unless they're saying they're going to give you another password, so you will log in with two passwords, which would be a token. It's strange. I've never heard that one before.
A comment, as Al said, one of the current limitations of a passkey is that it is not portable across operating systems. So storing the passkey in a password manager is the best workaround. However, the FIDO Alliance's forthcoming credential exchange protocol will enable the syncing across devices. Good to know. And I have had it in a couple of presentations since 2017 that you need to have a Social Security account, whether you ever use it, I don't care. You need to have an IRS account for your kids, your grandkids, starting when they're little. And again, I don't care if you access it, you want to lock it down so somebody doesn't become you. And when later on somebody suggests that and you try to set up an account, they say, I'm sorry, you already have one.
And that's a very good point. My understanding is, I don't have any kids young enough to have gone through this. My understanding is that at time of birth nowadays, the child is assigned a Social Security number.
Yep. And by the time they start working, say they get to 18 and somebody's been them all these years and nobody even knew about it. And it's critical that you put a freeze on your accounts. It's critical that you don't do those three things. And you just need to. We need to. And it's sad that, it's gotten to this. Bill James has his hand up.
I got an alert from Discover today about my Social Security being compromised on the dark web. But the last four is not my Social Security.
Interesting. Mine was.
So maybe it just says account center last. Maybe what they're telling me is that I didn't check it. Maybe it's the last four of my Discover card.
Oh, okay.
Okay, possible.
Yeah, mine matched for me.
But
and I thought, okay, fine. And you think, now what do? I've done everything I'm supposed to. So good job, Judy. And you want to be able to say that about yourself. Good job. You've done as much as you possibly can do. Do we have any other questions? Sharon, you're on.
Thanks. Not a question, just a feedback. When you lie for those security answers, I happen to use the Apple keychain. So under the Apple keychain, there's a column for secure notes, which I create with a password. And in secure notes, I put the lied answers in that secure note because I'm not going to remember them later. What did I say on that lied answer? Who is my favorite vocalist? Maybe I'll say, Meatloaf or Eminem or whatever. So store that lied answer somewhere also.
Absolutely.
How true. That's too cool.
I recommend that you store that in your password manager.
Yeah.
And that's what keychain is.
I use secure notes a lot in password manager.
Yeah, I love it. Ungerman, you're on.
Another security guru. I don't remember which one. I follow a whole bunch. Great presentation anyway. So another security guru said, okay, lock down your Social Security number. Okay. I guess that means I go to socialsecurity.gov and tell them to lock it. No, by digging, you find out you're supposed to go to E-Verify, which is supposedly verifying people as being authorized to work in the United States, regardless of their origin. So you go to E-Verify and you set up an account. To set up an account, you go through a process that asks you a bunch of questions. The questions, usually 5 to 8 of them, all come from the information that is in one of your credit bureau accounts. Many of us have seen that when we've gone through the same process with other sites. So they'll say, is the first 4 digits of your street address 1976? And one of the distractors might be 1976, maybe not.
5525180
Not me. So at any rate, it's a combination of answers that might be wrong, in which case you say none of the above, or it might be right, in which case you say, oh, yes, it's the third distractor. So they give you 5 tries per session to go through this 10-question questionnaire. I have now failed 5 times those 5 questions, and you have to wait 72 hours to do it again. It's at the point now where I'm actually recognizing the questions. So there was a help link, and I clicked on the help link and it let me send a message to their help desk. And I said, okay, I'm constantly failing your test. What do I do about getting my account? And they said, oh, you have to contact the credit bureau and find out which answers are wrong and then have them corrected. Well, I have pulled my credit reports. I have looked at them and I don't notice anything wrong. So the only other thing I can figure out is that somebody has already purchased my credit card off the dark web, has tried to impersonate me and try to set up an account, and has provided the wrong information that I don't recognize. Because otherwise, I can't lock my Social Security number, which I still can't do.
And I've had a Social Security account for years, and I don't have to do that. Back in the day, it was much easier to set yours up than going to the E-Verify. And the other thing that every single person that is here, you need to check your 3 or 4, I talked about the 4th one earlier in the month, credit bureau report. Just don't check one and say, done. You don't, they're all different. I checked one and I was living in Florida 2 different times. And I laughed. I'm a California kid forever. And I've been in Florida twice at conferences, you know, but I got in touch, and it only was on one report. And I got in touch with them and sent them info, and they changed it immediately, removed it. But you need to make sure that what is on your credit bureau report is accurate information. And if it's not, get it changed. It's imperative that you do that. So your digital executor asset person can start with a clean report when you're no longer here, and they're making sure that somebody doesn't steal your ID and set up accounts for you and stuff like that. So please, so you have homework. We usually don't give homework, and I never gave homework in my 20 plus years of teaching tech classes to adults, but this is important that you guys all take care of that. Tell your kids, no matter how old they are, your grandkids, your friends, your relatives, we're the techies. We know about stuff like this, and the mission of everybody's 501c3 group, and even if you're not a nonprofit, is education. That is what we are all about. We educate our members, and we should educate friends, relatives, and all those other people. John, I am off my soapbox. Take us off, kiddo.
I want to thank everybody who's been with us today, especially to our 2 presenters. And Al, thank you so much. I look forward to hearing from you again next month. Speaking of next month, we talk about next month because even though there's a Wednesday coming up next week as part of October, we take the day off. I'll tell Judy that's going to be our Halloween holiday that we're taking off.
Thank you.
But the important thing to note is that in November, we have a Saturday safari, which will include our annual meeting. So watch for information about that, and come and join, be a part of the national organization and find out what's going on and everything like that. And then we'll be back again, as we said, with Al Part 2 and another workshop in November. Only 2 workshops each month, November, December, because of holidays. So everybody enjoy your last week of trick-or-treat October, and be careful on trick-or-treats. I got a report of somebody who had taken a bag or a box of those gold wrapped chocolate nutty things, unwrapped all of them, and put a Brussels sprout in its place and rolled it back up and put it out for trick-or-treat. Said only take 1. And everybody thought, oh, those Rocher chocolates, and they grabbed a whole bunch. And they get home and it's Brussels sprouts.
They have gained a gazillion pounds.
Have a great weekend. Thanks, everybody. Stop this now.